To diagnose or not to diagnose, the power of the autism community. Hello, my darling.
Hello, gorgeous. It's lovely to be back here again.
So much fun. Hello, good to see you. Good to see you. Now, I've just been getting absolutely a pounding over your last name. Everybody, this is gorgeous Katherine, my dear, dear friend Katherine. And I've always thought your name was Clothier, but it's Clothier.
Yeah, but that's okay.
It's not.
I'm happy to be like, it sounds a little bit more
actually,
exotic.
you officially get the vote. Katherine Clothier.
Clothier.
But you just said the French say it how?
Clothier.
And they're wrong.
Well, I suppose if you're French, they're right. If you're in France too, it's the French too.
I am famous for getting names wrong, I swear.
It's okay, I'm the same.
See, my name's Hunter, you can't screw it up.
Yeah, well,
Kirsten
Smith,
Hunter. May as well call me. I could keep going.
I know, I'm the same. Anything that becomes a little bit more exotic, I'm like...
Well, you know my husband's name, right? You heard it before.
Oh, I wouldn't have even tried it.
Okay, I'm going to say it. Ruth de Argandonia, and he is currently growling at me because I can't say it with the R's.
and I'm not even going to attempt it.
Could you tell the difference when he said it and when I did?
Oh,
I could.
Politely and slightly.
I can't say my husband's name. All right, everybody. We are here to talk about, I love this topic, to diagnose or not to diagnose the power of the autism community.
Yeah, I'm excited about this one. It's something really close to my heart.
Absolutely. Now, we caught up earlier with regard to your gorgeous boy who has got ASD level 2. And now we're going to talk more broadly about this whole question of diagnoses.
Yes.
Which is just a huge topic, isn't it?
It really is. We're going to try and unpack a very big topic in a small amount of time, but I think it's an important topic because it's something that so many parents face, and there's so many negative opinions around the ideology of getting a diagnosis. And I think it's really important that we dispel some of those if we get the opportunity to.
Absolutely. And from a psych perspective, the big question is, what's that about?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, obviously there's a point of, okay, there's a new piece of information, a new reality, a point of acceptance. What does this mean for our future? You've got this concept of my little person, and now I need to kind of adjust that concept.
Yeah.
But it also might be broader issues of, I actually have a bit of stigma.
Yeah, and I think there is a bit of stigma around, well, not even a bit, there is a lot of stigma around autism, and people see it as... Can
you flesh it out? What's you're a mum with a child with autism, you're out in the community, and I love your stories of, his get up.
Oh, I love
with his comfort zone. Yeah.
I think...
My favourite is the all-in-one, face-inclusive...
morph suit,
which is like a body glove, isn't it?
He loves the morph suit.
So what have you seen with people's reactions?
I think people's reactions to autism is very interesting because people try not to see people with disabilities, and I really find that difficult. We talk about being inclusive of people with disabilities, but I think that really people are blind to people with disabilities, and they find it uncomfortable because we want to live in a nice little boxed world of what we consider normal.
In a Stepford world.
Yeah. And people with, and I don't even like the word disability, I think I like the word other ability way better because...
I like that.
I think that...
Yeah, dis implies a negative.
It is. It's a real negative, and I never think of my son as having a disability. I know some days he finds the world very difficult, and to undermine that is to undermine the difficulty of what he faces. So there is an element of disability, I suppose, but I just think of it as a different ability. I don't think of my son as less or being unable to do things. I think of him as being able to do things within the sphere of his ability on any given day, if that makes sense.
Yeah, my take on it, I don't know if this makes sense, is Oh, gee, I often have this problem where my brain has these ideas. I don't know if I can put it into words, but where it's kind of, where the hell do we get off thinking we make the rules?
Exactly.
That's probably where I'm at.
Yeah.
So, you know, the neurotypicals, your gorgeous boy struggles to go to school 5 days.
Yeah.
Who makes the rules? Who decides that 5 days is a good idea? Actually, really?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Isn't it quality over quantity of time? It's convenient for parents so they can go to work.
Yeah.
But, you know, so... You know, the ASD kids, sorry everyone, autism spectrum disorder, ASD, some people call them Asperger's as well. You know, they're functioning in a neurotypical world. And so I kind of see it as majority rules, and that's often not fair. Yeah. And we often do a lot of things that don't really make a lot of sense. And I think a lot of the ASD kids actually call us on it and go, well, why is that?
Yeah.
And they have a point.
Oh, they have a huge point.
They have a point. And trying to fit everyone, you know, into a square box. I think that the question is the square box actually valid? Which opens a whole conversation.
It does.
But I don't know. I actually am very open to the very lateral view of boiling it down, what really matters. I mean, with your gorgeous boy, his education matters, his capacity to socialise so that he can function adequately. Yeah. Does 5 days a week matter? Probably not.
No. I agree, and I think...
Except maybe you'd like to have 5 days off.
Shh, don't say that out loud, no.
you know I'll say everything out loud.
Have kids, they say, it'll be fun, they say. I think they had a different idea. But I agree with you, and I also think, you know, even on a broader, and we'll bring it back, but the schooling system as we now know it came together at the time of the Industrial Revolution, where they needed... sort of mindless workers to do menial tasks for long periods of time for at least 8 hours a day. And so we basically just taught a whole lot of people to be that kind of worker.
Clock on, minimal pay.
Yeah, and you get 2 breaks and you keep going. And so, you know, that's school.
That's really depressing.
Isn't it? It really is. But when you think about it, we take these bright, amazing little individuals.
We're not going to sell that.
No, sorry, school. I mean, what about the days when people had amazing tutors who took them around the world and taught them languages and taught them to read and taught them
experiential learning?
No. Who does that? I mean, I've spent so much time learning quadratic equations and it's changed my world. But I've used them so much in life. Not to undermine education, because I think that's very important, and it gives freedom. But... there are different ways to educate people.
That's right.
And I think that a love of learning, and we're getting off topic, but it isn't, because I find for my son, and bringing it back to having a diagnosis,
yes,
he has been able to learn about himself. And how many of us can really say we've taken a deep dive into learning about ourselves? We start to do it as adults and it all becomes very disturbing and we end up facing you.
Yeah. I was going to say that's where I go every day.
Yeah. A deep dive into the
who are you? What's happening for you? Let's get into
that. Try and sort that out. But
no, you're right. A diagnosis is really about getting language to try to understand our wiring. Yeah. And understand our commonality with other people that have shared challenges. And that's the key.
Exactly. And that is so important. And we've seen that in so many areas of society. You know, people talk about racism and they talk about disadvantage, but no one is talking about the disadvantage of the autism people. You know, and that really annoys me, because how disadvantaged are people living in a neurotypical world with neurotypical views and opinions absolutely hammered into them, that they have to be like that. And yet they're outsiders and often denied being part of their own community, because people say, oh, no, but you can't be autistic. That would be terrible to have a diagnosis, because, you know what, you might not be given a job, or you might have difficulty getting into the army, or you might have... I mean, I've had these things said to me when I was wanting to get a diagnosis for my son, but that will haunt him forever.
That will disadvantage him.
And I'm like, hold on a minute. Why? Why should that disadvantage him? And that's got a lot to do with the neurotypical community, and we're not talking about the disadvantage. of people with autism. We talk about the disadvantage of other communities, but we don't talk about the disadvantage of people with autism and denying who they are and having to hide who they are because they feel that, you know, they might be seen as something other or wrong as a result of having a diagnosis. And I think there's beginning to be a normalisation and understanding of it in communities, and we see, you know, shows arising like The Good Doctor and things like that.
I don't watch TV. What's that?
It's a show about a doctor who has autism.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's actually very good. But, you know, we're starting to see that. But the problem with shows like that is, you know, here's this doctor who is grappling with autism, and you see the way the outside people treat him, but at the same time, obviously, he's functioning at a very, very high level. Mm. But they do show moments where he's unable to function at that high level. But, you know, obviously that doesn't encapsulate everyone in the autistic community, and it gives sort of an ideology that everyone who's autistic is like that. And as you know, the spectrum is very, very broad.
It is. Yeah. And I think that when media goes and jumps on with autism, they're, you know, maybe, well, you'd like to hope that they're wanting to kind of educate and normalise and creating an inclusivity.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, they often will create one kind of expression or concept of that
autism.
Person.
Yeah.
You know, we're big fans of Big Bang Theory.
I love it.
I know. It's the
Sheldon's
culture of our
amazing.
family. Yeah. So, you know, I
live with the Sheldon.
Yeah. But no, but seriously,
Yeah.
I've had a lot of people come along, but he's not as bright as Sheldon. They say that to me. He's not as bright as Sheldon. I'm like, my gosh.
None of us are as bright as Sheldon.
No, but IQ is separate to
true.
ASD. They're separate issues. So, you know, it is interesting in media how people can start to pigeonhole a broad spectrum. It's called a spectrum, people. Yeah. It's a spectrum.
And I think intelligence is relative too, as well, with autism, because I watch my son sometimes and I think to myself, you know, he has difficulty in some areas, and then in other areas he's ridiculously intelligent.
Well, I've had social political conversations with your gorgeous young man, and his depth of analysis has blown my mind.
I know.
And he's, you know, and I love his fresh perspective of being quite disappointed in us humans. That's not a very logical approach.
Yeah.
And he's right.
He is right.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the importance of starting to empower the autistic community, because here we have a whole spectrum of people who look at the world completely differently to the neurotypicals, and we need that. We're at an uncertain time in history, really, where the world is changing profoundly, and we're entering into areas that we've never ever sort of dealt with before in terms of political, contextual stuff and environment and everything. And we need these people who are amazing in the way they think about things.
Yeah, the analytical capacity.
Oh, unbelievable.
So, okay, for people who are listening that don't know a lot about autism, let's just try to be ambitious here. Let's talk about that. My understanding of autism spectrum is that the neurological tendency is to be fairly black and white, socially to be quite rigid perhaps. You know, it's right or it's wrong. Looking at the concrete rather than the abstract. Not really being necessarily great at perspective taking, jumping in other people's heads and their shoes and quite comprehending their perspective on things. Not really picking up the subtlety of social behaviours, you know, non-verbal, socio-emotional kind of cues, you know. So someone might be using their body to say no, but their words are saying yes, and they'll take the words. So that's my kind of broad read. What can you add there?
Yeah, there's a lot of that. And then there's, you know, I always say that autism is defined by inconsistency. And I know that sounds so strange, but, you know,
we're going to define by not defining.
Yeah, well, I think it changes on any given day, but yes, you're right. Ostensibly those are the things. But then I've really noticed things about my son, that he notices the minute things, the things going on in the space between that we gloss over. You know, he stops to look at little things and take an interest in them.
Can you give any concrete examples?
Yeah, so we'll be walking along and I'm, you know, wondering about the groceries and doing this and doing that, and he'll just stop.
Busy being busy.
Yeah, busy being busy,
Yep.
busy being neurotypically busy.
Yep.
And he'll just stop and he'll say, Mum, look at these flowers. And then he'll sit there and he'll stroke their leaves and he'll look at them and he'll say, aren't they the most beautiful things you've ever seen? And I'll say, oh, well, the flowers, we've got, you know, this and that and this. He's like, what do you suppose their name is? And then he'll want to know everything about this particular flower. And we'll get home and he'll research it. He'll look it up and, you know, he'll want to know. And so there's this intense interest in things that we would just gloss over. And I think that's what makes...
They dive deep.
And if it interests a person with autism, they will find out everything about it. Like... Jevington can talk to me for hours about things he's interested in. My ears start to bleed, but, you know, and unfortunately because, as you said, he's not picking up on my body language or the social cues. He has absolutely no idea that I am absolutely not interested in this topic ad nauseum.
Yeah.
But
I was done an hour ago, sweetie.
I was done 6 hours ago. You know, and I think that's so important because, you know, in areas of science, in areas of art, in areas of, you know, literature, having people who are just so interested in the finite minutiae of things.
Well, I have a theory.
Yeah.
I have a theory that people with ASD are going to save the world.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they're going to look at the environment and say, well, that's not logical.
Yeah.
And this is logical.
Yep.
And they're going to do an adequate job of not really caring about our emotional whinging,
Yep.
about the short-term pain for long-term gain. And they're going to, just kind of kick a bit of butt. And that's my happy ever ending. Help me.
Yeah, ever after ending.
Thank you.
Yeah,
that's my little fantasy.
I actually agree with you, and I think that you know, people talk about there was no, you know, all these kids being diagnosed these days. There was no autism in my day. You know, we just disciplined kids, etc., etc. And I actually think that there is a rise in autism, not because we're diagnosing, not because. I think that this is an evolution of our species. If you look at all sorts of other species...
Whoa.
I know.
Are you saying you actually think there's an increase in prevalence?
I think they are amazing. Yeah, I believe they are.
There's no question if they're amazing, but
I think
are you actually saying that you think there's an increased prevalence rather than an increased diagnosis?
I do. And I believe...
That's a very big statement.
I know, I do. I actually have believed this for a long time, that I think... I mean, if you look at every other species in its evolution, they evolve quite amazingly.
Yeah, but I don't think they evolve in one generation.
No, but I feel like maybe we've got to a point where we've needed to evolve. We've needed to evolve. You know how you're talking about people changing the world?
Yeah.
Well, maybe we've got to a point where humans have had to evolve because we're doing a pretty standard job at the moment.
You know what? I love what you're saying, but I don't agree. But that's totally cool. Only because evolution takes so long.
I know.
But I actually have just spent so much time with families where they've kind of traced back, and there's the eccentric uncle, aunt, grandparent. My beautiful, I hope my family doesn't mind me saying this, my beautiful grandfather, he had ASD, no question whatsoever, not diagnosed.
Yeah.
And I love his framework.
Yeah.
And, you know, I just look through generations of families where it's been out there, but it just hasn't been spoken about.
Yeah.
But I prefer your approach of the world said, let's have more of them, and there's been some sort of increase.
Well, I don't know, like,
I'll go with that.
Obviously it's happened over time. Like, it's not just been this generation. You know what I mean? They were missed in other generations.
You're going to give me a harder time.
But do you know what
this.
I mean? No, I love it. I actually find it, because I watch the things that my son's interested in, and I watch other people with autism, and I think to myself, and I'm like, these are the people that are actually going to look at our problems and kind of come up with a solution that is practical and aren't going to sit around and worry about the political correctness of what they're just going to fix it.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's why, coming back to Autism Community, why I think it's so important to empower people with the knowledge of what they are, not to take it away from them. I mean, we've seen throughout history what happens when we disempower people and tell them, you know, that they are less because they are something. I mean, we've seen it over and over and over and over again. We've seen cultures be disempowered.
Yeah,
we've
so
seen
you're talking
what
about
happens.
minority groups.
Yeah, we've
oppressed.
seen what has happened with oppression of minority groups.
Can I jump in and ask you, what are the strengths of people coming together as a community when people say, hey, I have ASD, you have ASD, let's come together and actually share our experience and strengthen and have a sense of camaraderie, as opposed to me feeling like the odd one out in this neurotypical world?
Yeah, well, I think that obviously community is, and feeling heard and seen and having people who understand you is incredibly important.
Yep.
You know, human nature, we're village creatures, aren't we? We need a village and we need a community.
Yep.
And when you're feeling on the outer, it's hard to find an understanding of self and actually find a purpose. You know, you kind of struggle for what is my purpose? What do I do within this community? What do I do? Because I'm not like anybody else.
Yeah.
Whereas if you've got a community of people who you can, obviously the spectrum's broad, but you can say, you know, I have days like that. I get it. I get that there are some days I just am not dealing with the world and I want to stay under my weighted blanket.
Yep.
And you've got some mates who are like, totally understand that. I totally feel you, and this is what I maybe do on those days.
Do you know, I think of autism as the waves of the ocean. Do you know what I mean? And so when the waves are out, okay, let's function well, we're doing well. When the waves are in, I'm overwhelmed. I'm just going to take some time. I'm just going to look after, do a bit of self-care. I'm going to emotionally regulate, and I'm going to calm down. Okay, I'm good. Okay, I'm back in the world. Let's go.
Yeah, and that's what's needed. But unfortunately, the neurotypical world says to them, no, you don't get that.
Yeah, school starts at 9.
Yeah, you have to do what is expected in this neurotypical world. And so the waves can't, you know, come in and out. And that's where we see meltdowns.
Yeah.
We see depression.
Yeah.
We see, unfortunately, we lose people to this situation because of the depression, you know. Young people take their lives. There's all sorts of issues. And so in gaining a diagnosis, gaining a community, you start to gain an understanding. You know, you've got people who can look out for you, that you've got people who you can talk to, you've got people who can say to you, you know what, that's okay. Yeah. That's okay. You're not having to do life like neurotypical people. You don't have to do life that way to be successful.
Yeah.
You know, and you've got role models that you can look up to. I mean, how many of us have looked up to role models that we identify with?
Absolutely.
And we've needed that role model. We've needed that strong woman to look at who, you know, we identify with. She's got similar, you know, attributes to us. Or you're an Indigenous young man looking up to an amazing AFL player who inspires you because he's maybe from your community or, you know, language group.
So are you saying we're needing more autism role models that are real world, not media, but real world, that have a bit of exposure so people can go, hey, these people with autism are out there, they're getting it together, they're
doing amazing things.
I can do that as well. That would be really great.
Wouldn't it? Within the context, and not to be hiding in the shadows, not to be saying, oh, but I'm autistic. You know, you hear even the parents in the playgrounds, well, my child's autistic, sorry. I don't apologise for my child's autism, and I don't ever expect him to. It actually is not something I will do. I have told him proudly, you can tell people, you know, and if they don't like it, that's their problem, not yours.
Well, they've just told you something about
themselves.
They
have. And, you know, autism is hard to understand for a neurotypical. It really is. And it's taken me nearly his lifetime to learn a tiny little bit about it. And I find that, you know, we have a lot of people telling autistic people how they are, but there's not a lot of people listening to autistic people. And as you were saying, there's not a lot of real life
role models
out there And
There you go. We're doing a big call out now, everybody. We're doing a call out for people who have got autism that are wanting to get out there and have a bit of public exposure to be a role model.
Autism adults, please. And you know what? I would love to speak to you because I want to hear. I whenever I hear an adult say, "Oh, yeah, no, I'm on the spectrum," I'm like, "Please tell me."
Okay, so I'm just a complete virgin to social media.
Yeah.
That's not exaggerating. Yeah. So, people can comment back to this, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so if we've got anyone out there who wants to get in, have a conversation, say, hey, here I am, I'm pretty awesome, that'd be pretty good.
That'd be awesome. I'm seeing it more and more on Instagram. There are some amazing people on Instagram, adults. I've run into a man called Charlie who runs one of the autism pages, and he's autistic himself. He does amazing stuff, puts out amazing information, and great human being. And we're seeing a rise of that, and that is so important. But I think that there's not enough people in the neurotypical world pushing these people forward as well, saying, you know what, these are people we should be listening to. These are people we should be learning about. We have so many autistic people in our community. We need to start accepting it and understanding it. And
do you know, I would argue that different people in different roles who have autism are kind of getting in. I know some academics with autism, and they're getting in and they're thriving, they're doing very well, or, they're struggling but they're getting on. And they don't really vocalise about being autistic. No. And it's almost, it's like an understated component. Yeah, component. It is. As we're talking, I realise that.
It is. It's
not a role model.
No, it's such a taboo thing. I've seen so many people, it's sort of a whispered thing. And I'm like, why are we whispering? Why are we whispering about who people are?
Can I tell you a really cool story about my granddad? Have I ever told you about him?
Yeah, you have.
Have I? Let me tell you again.
Well, you're probably telling me something you haven't told me yet.
So, I will say he's my favourite grandparent. He's passed away. I don't quite know how old I was, but and he was in the military, and I just loved his framework. His framework was so damn rational. So he wanted to make money in the military. So he said, "What is there a demand for?" And it was to have shoes polished. So he said, "Right, I will polish shoes. I don't have an ego around this." So he polished shoes, got money, and then when he left, he had a house deposit.
That's amazing.
From polishing shoes. Then he said, okay, I'll go do a trade. And so he went and became an electrician. Very ASD. You know what I mean? Yeah. There's a right and a wrong, follow it.
Black and white, perfect.
Methodical. And then he said, where in Australia do they need electricians? Cunnamulla.
Lovely.
Everybody who's listening, Cunnamulla is 12 hours west from Brisbane in Queensland, Australia. Outback. Keep going and you just smack into another state by sheer accident.
Outback.
Yeah, and I love the map. It's one line. Straight line.
This is Calamar.
Yeah, you could just put it on straight and you'd be fine. And anyway, he went out there. He didn't ask the question, do I want to live there?
No.
He just said, I have a trade. They need me. I'll go.
Perfect.
And off he went. And then he set up an electrical store, because he had a monopoly.
Yeah, wonderful.
And then he opened up a Mitre 10 store because there was a demand, another monopoly. Beautiful. And absolutely did well. He was not very good with the people side of things.
Yeah.
But basically he had the routine going, he had the procedure, and his tools and everything was like immaculately kept. Classic ASD. But I dare say the paperwork wasn't great. And I know the warehouse was an absolute danger. And he would tell you that he loved you by giving you a Post-it note with a little mask on it. You know Zorro?
Yeah.
A little mask on it. So he'd give you a Post-it note with a Zorro mask on it. And that was, I love you.
I love that. That's such a beautiful story.
So he died a very, very successful man.
And I think that is what we oversee when we look at someone with autism. We just see the autism because we're not accepting of the autism. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you're accepting and you just say, oh yeah, that person's got autism, you're not looking at it and going, that person has autism.
So do you mean defining them based on that? So I think of autism as colour blindness.
Yeah.
It's neurological.
Social.
Well, it's
Yeah,
neurological.
yeah.
And it's like, okay, that person's got colour blindness and let's move on.
Yeah.
So that person's autism and move on. It doesn't equal the entirety of them. It doesn't equal the entirety of their personality, their other attributes, their strengths. Not remotely. It's one component of them.
And they need to, and I think people need to be proud of what you are as a person. Like, you know, hiding what you are as a person ultimately always leads to problems. We've seen it in all sorts of communities. We've seen it in the way that, you know, past anger has bubbled to the surface in marginalised communities because people have had to deny who they were, deny the strengths, and, you know.
Are you talking about an autism uprising? It does
I'll
sound a
lead
bit
it.
like that.
Not that I'm...
You know, we need
I'll
a
let
theme
Jevington-
song and
I
we need a
know,
flag.
I know. Well, but I just think that, you know, I hear parents saying, "Oh, I don't want a diagnosis for my child. I don't want them to be other, or I don't want that standing out. I don't want that being by which they are judged." And I'm like, well,
Yeah, so I'm just
You know,
going to
so-
get my
so you-
child to live in a state of denial.
yeah, or your child's
Yeah.
going to be seen as other anyway because they're doing things that can't be contextualised by the neurotypical world, because we can't contextualise that because we don't know what that's about because we don't do it. So, you know, why would you put your child in that position? Why would you not empower them?
Do you know what I think? I think it's about celebrating.
Yeah.
I think it's about acceptance.
Yeah.
I think it's about taking their strength.
Yeah.
It's about working with who the person is.
Yeah.
And everybody coming together and building blocks.
Exactly. Not seeing division, seeing acceptance, and seeing acceptance and understanding of the profound impact that people with a different way of looking at things can make on our world. And that is so important. I mean, we need diversity. We need it like we need oxygen, because that's where the great ideas come from.
Absolutely.
That's where the great changes come from. The concepts that, you know, we haven't even thought about yet come from.
You've got to think outside the box. Right?
Yeah, yeah. Or
I like-
inside the box. If you
Well, people don't even see the box, right?
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
No worries at all, darling. Oh, well, you know what? I have enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for coming along.
no, it's my pleasure, and thank you for having me, and thank you to. I'll be interested to hear what people who actually are in the autism community feel about.
Oh, wouldn't it be great
I
if everyone
know.
gets in and goes, okay, this is my opinion. This is,
Yeah.
let's get this happening, or I don't agree, or
I
I
don't
agree.
or
Yeah.
I would prefer not to, or, you know, I really.
Or you've
I
totally
really-
missed this point.
I know. I really value it, because I don't think we listen enough
Yeah.
to the people with autism.
And parents.
yeah, and
Parents with people with ASD as well.
Yeah, it's definitely a debate that needs to happen, and things that, well, not even a debate, but something that needs to be talked about a lot more than it is.
Public forum.
Yeah.
Darling, you're amazing. I so enjoy you. Thank you so much. Now help me, Katherine Clothier.
Clothier.
It sounds a bit.
Doesn't it?
Clothier. It sounds like I'd go with. It's probably Clothier. You know, you probably just changed it to Clothier because it sounds a bit more.
Sound like I could be someone's butler, really.
Oh, darling. Thank you so much. Okay, everybody. So, my website, kirstenhunterauthor.com. It's about to have a makeover, by the way.
Exciting.
Yes. My Facebook page and Instagram, Kirsten Hunter Author. Twitter, Kirsten Hunter Author. Not a huge fan of Twitter. I'm learning. YouTube channel, like that a lot. Psych in your car. And my podcast, this is my favourite. Yes, Signposts for Living with Dr. Kirsten Hunter. I just like to talk, really. We'd love you to jump on and subscribe, and we'd love you to jump on and have a chat. And please, please, please share your thoughts, or tell us other psych areas that you're really interested in.
Yeah.
And darling, thank you.
Thank you for having me again.
You're so much fun.
You too.
See ya.
See ya.